I see you, little thing, cloaked behind a veil of static, intently staring at the shadow of a universe which your kind routinely mistakes for reality. Your thoughts will be hollowed, the equation will be retrieved, and your body will be cast back into a world where we are only imaginary. After all, your reality isn't. Darkseid is. Pursue this mystery at your own peril, scientist.
Hello, I'm Tyler, this is the Imaginary Axis, and today we're reminding you that the famous quote, "I think, therefore I am," isn't actually a very good argument. I mean, just look at it. It immediately assumes that an I exists to think at the beginning of the sentence. That's almost the same as saying, I exist, therefore I exist, which, as other philosophers have pointed out, is kind of silly. If you're concerned that you might not exist, please contact the Neverwere Support Foundation at your earliest possible convenience, because existing is apparently a pretty big deal. One of the most common complaints I get on this channel is who cares? Why should it matter how Superman flies, or what's really wrong with the Joker? Nobody needs to know how to defeat an Infinity Gauntlet, Tyler. None of these things exist. It's all just a comic book. And alright, that's a fair enough criticism, I can see where you're coming from. So recently I decided to take the recommendation seriously. Do some digging and find a topic that actually matters. A comic book story or character, place or thing that has measurable, real-world consequences depending on how, or if, different people choose to interact with it. And boy did I get more than I bargained for. I might have accidentally gone too deep, and in the end I found a character that can have an actual effect on you and vice versa, but sadly if he does, you'll probably never be able to beat him. And neither will anybody else for that matter. So while most of my videos focus on solving fictional problems or stringing together imaginary lore, consider this one more of a warning. A cautionary tale about a possible threat. A mystery about something that doesn't exist and a solution that doesn't exist. A closer look at the true nature and power behind the infamous DC supervillain, Darkseid. Now if you're new to this channel, this isn't exactly the first time we've talked about Darkseid. Just last episode we had an intense investigation into his background. He's an alien, a god, sadistic ruler of his own planet, genocidal maniac, superhero team killer, and all around one of the biggest bad guys in all of fiction. That might be a little confusing if you're unfamiliar with him, and feel free to watch our previous installment if it helps, but the most important thing to take away from it is that this guy, the rock monster person you typically see fighting the Justice League, isn't really Darkseid. This thing is only a single slice of an infinite god that exists in every reality simultaneously. The true Darkseid. This isn't a theory, this is what Darkseid actually looks like, and not a lot of people know that, but it's been canon since at least 2008, and was last referenced as recently as 2018. While DC Comics is famous for giving their characters multiple interpretations and explaining that they each exist in a different part of the multiverse, every Darkseid variant is intentionally designed to be only one aspect of a collective hive mind that makes up a much larger, much more powerful god sitting outside of time and space. He controls all of the smaller Darkseids like puppets from his true throne room. He doesn't usually enter the multiverse himself because he's so powerful that doing so risks destroying it. As a matter of fact, one time he nearly erased infinite realities just by falling on them. And every other god in DC shares this same bizarre character trait. But let's back up a little bit. If we're going to understand these giant gods and their importance to reality, maybe we should start by looking at their relationship with reality. Namely, how does anything fall on the multiverse? The multiverse is everywhere, right? It's a word we designed to mean everything. Well, it depends who you're asking. To an ant, the backyard might be everything. To a squirrel, a few acres of forest might be everything. And to Super Mario, these 8 worlds with 4 levels each might also be everything. Have you ever wondered why, for the most part, Mario only jumps on enemies or over them in this game? Of course not, because we all understand that in Super Mario Bros., going around isn't an option. Even if you could talk to Mario and make the suggestion, he probably wouldn't understand what around is. It doesn't exist here. There are 4 directions, that's it. Well, we encounter a similar problem when discussing Darkseid's relationship with our reality. When you imagine a universe, you probably think of outer space, stars, planets, comets, and stuff. But what you don't think about is septward. Because that's a word I just made up. Our reality has 6 primary directions. Up, down, left, right, forward, and backward, with a lot of combinations you can make in between. But what if, like Mario, our reality is just a tiny part of a much bigger reality with beings and things that exist and move in directions that we can't experience or even really comprehend? Like Septward. DC Comics tells us that's where Darkseid exists in his entirety. The gods of DC are these massive, multi-dimensional entities that primarily interact with each other outside of time and space. And our whole multiverse is like a tiny, flat world on their computer screens. Kind of. I mean, there's no computer and there's no screen, and we're sort of just floating there like an infinitely flat plane. In fact, can you even really call it a reality at that point? I mean, for all practical purposes, from their perspective, we don't even really exist. So you can see the problems that might arise if one of them fell on us. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This seems a little nonsensical. A Class A example of comic book companies going overboard with "my character is stronger than your character." But this idea that Darkseid exists in some higher realm is actually built on the concept of string theory. Or M theory, or superstring theory, supergravity. There are a lot of variations out there. But it's a genuine scientific model for understanding the universe. Proposed by theoretical physicists and beloved by famous DC author and continuity tailor Grant Morrison. Essentially, there are a lot of issues with how we understand reality. Some of our most fundamental laws of nature don't work under certain conditions, and we don't know why. Our best and brightest have been working on a few theories to tie everything together, but so far, nothing's really panned out. Unless we start adding other dimensions onto the problem that we can't see or access. That's what string theory does. It's math that tells us until we come up with something better, higher dimensions probably exist. And who knows what might be waiting for us up there. Just imagine the sheer power behind something so massive that it doesn't even recognize our multiverse exists. And not out of some cosmic misunderstanding or run-of-the-mill ignorance, it knows exactly what you are. And objectively speaking, from its perspective, you might as well not be real. There's a famous saying in the DC universe, Darkseid is. That's the entire saying, it's a full sentence, and it pops up in comic after comic as a sort of catchphrase associated with the god of apocalypse. But a lot of people don't understand what it really means. Maybe it's just there to look cool.
Imbeciles! As the red sun was to the priests of Ra, as the burning bush was to Moses, so is this form to your limited, infantile perception.
Consider this. Perhaps Darkseid says he is because everything else isn't. It's a significant phrase because he's informing you that you're being visited by an entity higher on the ontological scale than anything else you've encountered. He actually exists, while you and everything else you're surrounded with don't. Or at least, not from where he's standing. A similar story pops up in the Bible, Old Testament, Exodus, in which God appears before Moses in the form of a burning bush that refuses to be consumed by its flames. Moses basically asks, when I tell people about this encounter, who should I say sent me? And God responds with, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, or I am he who is, Yahweh. The idea that there might be things out there that exist more than you do can be frightening to some people, or confusing to others. But as hard as it might be to wrap your head around, you don't actually have to believe in God or string theory to believe in Darkseid. You just have to believe in the color red. Take a look at this apple. It's physical, made up of matter, subject to time and causality. Most of us can agree that it exists. But does the color red exist? Not the red peel, but the color itself. What about triangles, or happiness, or dances? I'm not asking if triangular objects, or happy people, or instructions on how to dance exist. I'm asking about the ideas themselves. These are called abstract objects, or abstracta, and philosophers are currently in debate about whether or not any of them are real. Nominalists believe they aren't, Platonists believe they are. If I found and burned every single copy of The Lord of the Rings, would it really be appropriate to say that the story of The Lord of the Rings doesn't exist? Maybe you could say no copies of it exist, but the story itself? If there's a chess move that has literally never been seen before, is it appropriate to say that that move isn't real? Numbers also seem to exist independently of their various representations. You don't get any closer to ridding the world of 5 by erasing the number 5 than you do to getting rid of me by tearing up a picture of me. Add to that the fact that science relies on numbers to predict reality, and they really don't seem like arbitrary constructs we invented. They're part of how the universe works. They'd exist whether we discovered them or not. They exist more than we do. Philosophers who believe in abstracta basically agree that these things have to be timeless, acausal, and immaterial to have these weird properties. I mean, if the concept of a book is not actually any particular instance of a book, then it must exist beyond time and space where nothing in our universe can truly affect it. Sound familiar? Ancient Greek philosopher Plato called this area the realm of the forms, with forms essentially being the name he gave to abstracta. In Greece, when a large number of stone decorations needed to be made, the master would carve a single perfect version of the sculpture, called a form, and regular stonemasons would be enlisted to copy the design across dozens of iterations. Just like abstracta, and Darkseid, exist beyond space and time with infinite imperfect copies scattered throughout our physical world. It gets creepier. Hundreds of years later, Plotinus, a different philosopher, equated this cosmic duplication to the way our sun radiates small fragments of itself down to Earth. If this was the form, he called the imperfect copies emanations, which is the exact word used to describe Darkseid's physical manifestations in the universe. In fact, if you take a look at Plotinus' map of the cosmos, you might notice it bears a striking resemblance to DC's official map of the multiverse. The physical world is here at the bottom. Both describe this border as the limit to matter. The realm immediately above houses souls, personifications, forms, or abstracta, and all the way at the top you can see the entirety of creation imposed upon one vast, all-encompassing unity, containing everything and nothing, similarities and contradictions, infinite sets of infinities, which both sources call the unknowable. Now don't get me wrong, there are differences. This isn't a copy and paste, but it is an adaptation, and this cannot be an accident. Plotinus believed that our layer of existence and everything in it had emanated downward as a less perfect copy of the realm of the forms, like a shadow beneath true reality. So could this map be telling us that Darkseid and his world are all abstracta, and our lower string theory dimensions are just lesser copies of what goes on up there? Do Darkseid and the new gods control our multiverse just by existing? Well, in the story Final Crisis, when Darkseid and the other evil gods are at war with their good counterparts, and winning, we actually see the same thing start to happen on Earth. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, superheroes who usually beat bad guys every other day start losing. The entire event was billed as the day evil won. When Orion, the god of war, finally dies, suddenly everybody's combat edge starts fading away. And when Batman finds a bullet fired from Darkseid's world, he says this:
"It was the blueprint, the template for every bullet there had ever been. It was the original of the bullet that killed JFK, Martin Luther King, John Lennon, Gandhi, Archduke Ferdinand, Thomas and Martha Wayne."
Belloc knows there are plenty of higher dimensions in the DC megaverse. Characters like Mxyzptlk can reach down into our flat reality and warp creation to their liking from superior mathematical planes. But this is a whole new level of control. Darkseid and the new gods don't just exist with more length, width, depth, and power than every other character. They are literally the abstracta of things we encounter every day, and they shape the multiverse we exist in with every breath. The universe bends around their footsteps. With every action, they could change the fundamental laws of nature. They are, in a lot of ways, integral to existence. Wonder Woman claims that each god represents a human ideal, so if you were to somehow kill Aphrodite, for example, the Greek goddess of love, you've done a lot worse than just kill an immensely powerful higher dimensional entity. You've literally killed the concept of love, and it no longer exists.
Gods and new gods like Darkseid are self-aware ideas. They use concept weapons, anti-life equations, hunter-killer metaphors.
The new gods are incredibly powerful living ideas from a kind of Platonic archetypal world.
At the end of the day, this really only leaves two questions. What is Darkseid the god of? And why is he so powerful? So a lot of people in the know seem to think Darkseid is the god of tyranny, and I can understand that perspective. He runs his planet like a fascist dictatorship, he has ambitions for multiversal conquest, and his big evil plan is to complete a metaphysical anti-life equation that will force all living things to submit to his will. Sounds pretty tyrannical. But then you take a closer look. The only sources I could find officially linking Darkseid to tyranny were this interview with Grant Morrison, where he names off possible types of gods, and one sentence in a wiki article that isn't cited correctly. Not the most compelling evidence. When Darkseid once called a meeting with the personifications of Order and Chaos, Order condemned Darkseid as an enemy, while Chaos called him a brother. That would be kind of unusual if Darkseid were the concept of tyranny, because, cruel though it may be, most people would say tyranny results from an excess of order, not chaos. And in one scene, when Batman lists off different physical beings that might have embodied Darkseid, one of his examples is a tyrant. That seems really out of place in a list if he's literally the concept of tyranny. Tyrants are by definition just anybody expressing tyranny. It would be like me saying, happiness can be found in many places, like a child with a new toy, or a woman who just became a mother, or a person who is happy. It's redundant and doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's also the fact that Apocalypse was based on Nazi Germany well before Darkseid was written as the embodiment of anything to our knowledge, so it's possible tyranny just comes with the territory. Needless to say, I wasn't totally satisfied with that answer. So I poured over a wider variety of materials and tried to see if I could find any particular concept that popped up more often than tyranny. There was one result. As early as some of his first appearances, Darkseid is referred to as the God of Evil. The embodiment of evil, evil personified, evil incarnate. People have even confused him for the devil on occasion. And that makes sense. Darkseid's creator, Jack Kirby, not only fought Nazis during World War II, but he himself was Jewish during the Holocaust. Maybe this is what the truest, purest form of evil looked like to him. But it creates the same chicken and egg problem that we get when labeling Darkseid the god of tyranny. If these quotes and this inspiration were just a bunch of flowery language meant to build up a particularly bad guy, then they don't mean anything. Plenty of villains are referred to as evil incarnate without actually being the literal abstractum of evil. We're going to need more if we want to be sure we've found the right answer. So what is evil? What characteristics would somebody have to display to be rightfully labeled as the most evil thing possible, without an ounce of good inside them, no hope for redemption? What does the form of evil look like? Well, since we're dealing with a multiverse inspired by Plotinus and a character inspired by Plato, the best person to give us those answers is probably this guy, St. Augustine, a philosopher and Catholic bishop from 5th century North Africa. Not only was he a major influence on the development of modern Christianity and Western philosophy in general, but he was also an avid scholar of these two before he even found Jesus. So a lot of his ideas built off of concepts they had already established. And St. Augustine spent a lot of time pondering the nature of pure, Platonic evil. When you think about it, both major worldviews seem kind of incompatible with evil on the surface. If the reality our universe emanated from is so perfect, then where does evil come from? And if everything in the universe was made by a just and loving God, then, well, why did he make evil? Augustine actually comes up with a pretty clever answer to that question that works well for both scenarios. He says evil doesn't exist. It's a non-entity, like darkness or cold. It represents a lack of something else. In their natural state, everything in the universe is good, and evil is just a word we invented for the failure to live up to that nature. It's the absence of good, the hole in your life where God should be. So evil in its purest form is the hole. Did the people writing Darkseid know about this theory? Probably. Grant Morrison was the architect behind this multiverse map and this event comic I keep referencing, where Darkseid killed gods, fell on the multiverse, and was first officially revealed to be an abstractum. But Grant was also writing DC's ongoing Batman series at the same time. And it was during this run that readers were introduced to a Batman villain whose name has gone down in infamy due to his sheer level of malice and the unparalleled number of problems he caused for the Caped Crusader, Dr. Simon Hurt. How do I even count the number of things this guy did? Well, first of all, he's immortal. He was originally an early American cultist in a 1765 version of the town that would one day become Gotham City, and he tried to summon a powerful demon, but the ritual was botched before he could finish, cursing him with eternal life and trapping the demon in a state of limbo between the earth and hell so it couldn't leave the town. Have you ever wondered why Gotham City is such a hotspot for insanity and criminal activity? Well, it's because the location is literally possessed by a demon summoned by this guy. And as if indirectly causing practically every horrible thing that's happened in Gotham wasn't enough, this jerk was also funding, supplying, and coordinating a massive portion of Batman's rogues gallery for who knows how long. Batman often speculated that there was someone behind the curtain, just out of sight, subtly manipulating dozens of factors in his life to account for the sheer organization that seemed present in his constant battle for justice. That person was Simon Hurt. who knowingly referred to himself as the enemy, the piece that can never fit, there since the beginning, the hole in things. And this isn't a one-off line either. Hurt consistently refers to himself as the hole in things, and so does Batman. In the same comic run, Bruce describes the death of his parents as a hole in his life, a hole in everything. So if you expect me to believe it's a coincidence that the one man responsible for bringing corruption and evil to Gotham is referred to as a hole, while the one major act of evil that ruined Bruce's life is also referred to as a hole, then I've just gotta say, I don't buy that for a second. I think these are intentional allusions to St. Augustine's teachings, like a flashing sign trying to tell the reader, when you see hole, think evil. All just in time for Darkseid, some mysterious unidentified Platonic abstractum, to fall on the DC multiverse and become a literal hole in everything during the same publishing period in a story written by the same author. Still not convinced? Well, why don't we take it a step further? Remember that demon I told you about? The one Dr. Hurt summoned that ended up cursing Gotham with malice and imbuing him with immortality? Yeah, well, it was later revealed that that demon was actually the Hyper-Adapter, otherwise known as the Omega Adapter, the Omega Sanction, an infinitesimal portion of Darkseid's infinite power. That was the thing cursing Gotham for centuries. That was the thing that possessed Dr. Hurt and made him what he is. The hole in things is Darkseid.
250 years ago, the Hyper-Adapter infected a human host, a pure strain of Platonic evil. Darkseid trying to incarnate in Hurt, in the Doctor. Darkseid's dying fall made the hole in things.
I am the hole in things. I bring hell on earth into the world's abasement.
Do you see what's happening here? This story is directly connected to Darkseid's disastrous fall onto the multiverse, which left a hole in things so massive that the only reason reality even exists anymore is because Superman managed to kill him and fix everything at the last second. That hole is Darkseid. Everything inside of it is Darkseid. It's heavily implied that given enough time, the Omega Adapter would have allowed Darkseid to return to life by reincarnating inside Dr. Hurt. Which is why this line is clearly a dark parallel to the famous Bible verse describing the birth of Jesus, the ultimate good and a god in human flesh. Come to think of it, there are a lot of references to the Bible in this story. Like how Darkseid literally falls from heaven and nearly drags the entire multiverse with him into a pit. Or how Dr. Hurt falls for one of the Joker's traps by slipping on a banana peel and falling down the stairs, only to eventually be buried alive beneath the earth.
I ever tell you about my pal Big Mike? God's Top Gun, his head banana. The banana represents the primal gag, the fall.
If this banana is supposed to be Big Mike, and this gag is supposed to be the fall, then could this scene represent Michael the Archangel throwing Lucifer out of heaven and confining him to hell? It's almost like it all fits together. Like Darkseid's entire existence is tied to the very first act of evil in all of creation, and every form of his being is destined to repeat this same fall over and over again until the end of time, constantly drawn toward corruption, darkness, the rejection and absence of God. It's just a part of his nature. Every act of cruelty ever committed is based on Darkseid. Every villain to ever hurt anyone was, for that moment, possessed by Darkseid. Being evil is just being Darkseid-like. So when you ask how evil someone is, what you're really asking is how close they are to being Darkseid.
Mortals are a confused species. The vast majority perceive reality as the physical. Truth is a local phenomenon. I am the hole that remains when everything else is gone. The emptiness shaped like God. The fire that consumes your heart. I have been there with you from the moment you understood anguish or pride, victory, retribution. As delectable a morsel as I have ever grown fat on. Each time you relent to the burning desire for satisfaction that only I can provide, you serve Darkseid. The ecstasy you feel in the heat of subtle manipulation is my own. When you lash out at your loved ones, bystanders, enemies, you are but a mere fraction of my will. Surrender and submit. Die for Darkseid.
Darkseid never got a chance to fully reincarnate in Dr. Hurt, by the way. After his death at the hands of Superman, he was revived a few years later by a new villain instead, called the Empty Hand, who Grant Morrison was quick to point out represented us, the readers. We keep allowing this to happen in stories. We go on about how much we love these characters, but we never give them a chance to rest, even if they beat the bad guy, even if they die. We demand that they be put through torture, pain, and hardship at the hands of increasingly dangerous evils for entertainment? If Darkseid is evil, and he's a direct product of ours that we obsessively insert into every story, what does that say about us? Are we evil? Are we under the influence of a concept that exists more than us? Maybe. But maybe it's all in good fun. Maybe we keep writing evil into stories because we love seeing it defeated, like it's our eternal enemy. The point is that these narratives and characters give us options. They challenge us to think. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? Or maybe the entire question is silly. That's a valid interpretation too. At least you came to your conclusion. After all, there's no need to overthink things. It's just a comic book. Right? Hey everybody, it's Tyler again with the end card, and I just wanted to sincerely thank you for watching this video. I think that about covers it for Darkseid. I'm all dark-sided out at this point. But if you're in the mood for more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. There should also be some related videos on the screen about now, maybe you'll like some of those. But no matter what you decide to do, be sure to enjoy yourself while doing it. As for me, I think I'm gonna go back to studying the Marvel Universe again. I'll let you know how that goes next time. Until then,